Before we get into the policy or Gaza of it all, I kind of want to start with something that some people say is cheesy, which is your heart.
Well, I appreciate you talking about heart. I feel like heart is what we're missing, definitely what the current administration and Congress in the U.S.
Hmm.
is missing.
They need to let food into Gaza. They need to let food into starving kids.
You can ignore it, you can complain about it, or you can do something about it. And, I feel better doing something about it.
I'm Ahmed Eldin, and this is Out Loud, the podcast where we speak the unspeakable. We challenge what's comfortable, and we confront the status quo with people who dare to dream out loud. Ben Cohen is one of the co-founders of Ben & Jerry's, the Vermont-based ice cream company known for bold flavors and even bolder values. He's never shied away from taking a stand. And in recent months, Ben has emerged as one of the most unapologetically vocal Jewish American voices, calling out the U.S. government's role in what he calls a genocide in Gaza. Ben, have you called it a genocide? I just want to make sure.
I have called it a genocide. I've called it a genocide, a murder, a slaughter.
So I'm curious, what sparked this fire in you to speak out, especially in moments when staying silent might have been easier?
Well, I appreciate you talking about heart. I feel like heart is what we're missing, definitely what the current administration and Congress in the U.S. is missing, that they've lost their heart and they've sold their soul to lobbyists and donors. They've sold their soul to the money. I don't think that's what the people really want. I think people hate war. I don't want their countries to go around killing other mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers, sons and daughters, families just like themselves. And it was actually President Dwight Eisenhower who said that the people want peace so much that one of these days government is going to have to get out of the way and let them have it. The people are never trying to make war on others. It's the government that sets that up. And it's the government that convinces the population that some other boogeyman out there is the enemy. The government has all the tools of propaganda at its command. It has the bully pulpit, and the news that you hear, the stuff that you hear coming out from the government is a very one-sided point of view.
Yeah, and I think regardless of your politics, anyone who's a critical thinker and who's paying attention can see that. I'd be remiss not to start with Gaza, not only because I'm Palestinian, but I'm someone who has confronted this system of power, and it has cost me things. Last week or a few weeks ago, you walked into that Senate hearing and you stood up, interrupted the budget session, and you said something that echoed far beyond that chamber.
Move down the hallway.
Ben, why are you getting arrested?
Move down the hallway. If you stop, you will be arrested.
Kills poor kids in Gaza by buying bombs and pays for it by kicking kids off Medicaid in the U.S.
Keep going down.
And I just want to know what moved you to take that stand on that day. As Ben, what were you hoping to accomplish by speaking out so publicly?
Well, in a lot of ways, it was a personal statement. I, had been following how kids in our country are being poisoned by lead poisoning, irreversible brain damage that affects them for the rest of their lives. And we know how to prevent it. I mean, you get rid of chipping lead paint in low-income apartments, and you get rid of lead in plumbing. And the government knows how to do it, and it says, well, we just don't have the money. We happen to have money for bombing people, no problem. And so I was reading about that lead poisoning thing, which really gets to me. And then I'm reading day after day after day of the slaughter in Gaza. And, everyone has their breaking point.
Yeah.
I finally reached mine. And, I told the folks I work with that I want to go chain myself to the White House fence and put out this statement. And they said, oh, you can't really do that anymore. It's been militarized.
Mhm.
There's a 60-foot moat around the White House.
It's-
They suggested that I disrupt this congressional hearing. I said, I don't think that's going to be really effective. And I was wrong.
You were
They
wrong.
right.
I'm here to tell you you were wrong. Ben, I'm going to quickly interject because when I was working for Vice, I went to Flint, Michigan, and I saw the crisis there, something very similar to what you're talking about. That said, obviously, I've reached my breaking point like you, but as a Palestinian in particular, I have to share a bit of my heart. I sometimes felt so broken that were it not for people like you who maybe were doubting if it would be impactful on policy is a separate issue, but it was so impactful on me, and I know so many people who are kind of losing their sense of reality. I guess what I want to know from you is what's been the reaction and how do you sort of process the inevitable backlash, especially from those who claim to speak from either Christian values or Jewish values? I mean, why did you frame it in terms of children? And what were you feeling or thinking by linking those two issues?
That Congress is deciding to spend our money giving gifts of bombs to Israel, $20 billion worth, so that they can bomb children in Palestine. And they're paying for it by taking money from Medicaid, poor kids in the US. Why did I talk about children? I talked about children because it seems like people care about children kind of more than they care about adults, that children are innocent, that they're not belligerents, they're not expressing a point of view, they're not hurting anybody.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I talked about children. But I feel the same way about adults too.
I know. I mean, you're saying we prioritize the wrong thing as a government. And then as a society, it's not wrong to prioritize children. But I often wonder as a Palestinian man, it's like women and children. Whereas I know thousands and thousands of men who've been killed. And I guess, Ben, many Americans rely on the idea that our aid to Israel serves our interests somehow, U.S. interests. How do you respond when people say U.S. military support is about defending allies? What would you say to someone who argues that this spending is justified for security as it's being used as a priority over what you want to see funded?
I actually think it makes us less secure. We want to make friends around the world, and killing people doesn't help. I remember talking to an admiral who was part of the Eisenhower Media Network, retired admiral, and he was saying in regards to Iraq and Afghanistan,
Mm-hmm.
we're creating terrorists faster than we can kill them. When our government goes and kills family members, I think we create enemies. And also, I think there's no reason to do it. I believe that our country's military forces should be focused on protecting the geography of America. I don't believe that we should be involved in trying to control the world militarily and economically. The U.S. represents 5% of the world population.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it is the written policy of the United States to exert military power over the entire world, military and economic power.
Mm-hmm.
And it's also the written policy that if any country starts to develop militarily or economically, we are to regard them as an enemy, and we are to try to prevent them from growing economically and advancing militarily. And I think that's just bullshit. And I think it really gets us into trouble. And, when you think about the huge amount of money that we're spending to attempt to militarily control the entire world.
Yeah.
The US has 800 military bases all over the world. When I was growing up as a kid, yeah, I heard we had military bases in lots of different countries. I figured, yeah, that's the norm. Every country probably has that. And you look into it, and the country that has the next most bases outside of their country, it has like around 5. It's absurd. And the American people are clear that they don't want America to be the policeman of the world. And I think it's a policy that's done by the elites and the corporations for the elites and the corporations,
Yeah.
and essentially the weapons manufacturers and the war profiteers.
Specifically because you brought up money, the money spent on America and the money America spends. You joined other Jewish leaders in opposing APAC's stance. How do you talk with friends who support APAC?
I tell them we have a difference of opinion that I don't believe. I believe that political donations are essentially legalized bribery. In democratic countries, it would be against the law for interests like APAC or the National Association of Manufacturers to give money to politicians. They're not doing, they're trying to influence legislation. And, APAC was the biggest donor in this last cycle. And I think that's why the US is doing what it's doing. They've substituted their hearts for their wallets.
And speaking about what motivates us to do what we do and the role the heart plays or does not play, you've often linked your activism to a desire to build community and to protect the vulnerable. Where do you think that drive comes from? Not just to care, but to act.
I was brought up as a Jew. I still am a Jew. I'm a secular Jew. And I was brought up learning that the Jews were oppressed as a minority. And so I have a sympathy for other oppressed peoples. And, particularly this last Passover holiday, which is a celebration of the Jews escaping from their oppression, is some kind of cognitive dissonance. Here we're celebrating this holiday that we escaped from oppression, and now Israel is the oppressor of Palestinians. I was also, as a kid, kind of a gullible kid, a naive kid.
Yeah.
And they talked about America being about justice and equality and fairness. And I was right on board with that, man. I bought it hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
So then when I grow up and discover that that's not what it's about, it just offends me. And it's just common decency. And it's interesting when you have a little kid and, the little kid is punching and fighting or whatever, you say, hey, use your words. And our country still acts like a little kid. We don't talk. If we have some country that we don't like what they're doing, we break off diplomatic relations with them. We don't talk. I mean, Russia was trying to talk to us before the war in Ukraine. They said what their problem was. They said what they needed. They said, we want to talk. And the U.S. stonewalled them. We won't talk with you.
So, Ben, because you bring up acting like kids or being a kid, when you think back to your childhood, when you were a kid, I mean, what kind of kid were you? Curious? I mean, you told us a little bit. I could relate to what you were saying, but I wonder, were you outspoken at the same time? I mean, was there a moment or a memory that hinted you might one day become someone who stands up in Congress to call out injustice?
Well, I was a fat little kid. I was bullied. I was made fun of.
Same.
I would say when I was when around 12, I think,
Yeah.
there were the freedom rides down to the American South to protest mistreatment of Black people. And I wanted to go on those freedom rides. My parents wouldn't let me. And then I remember in junior high, what they currently call middle school.
Mm-hmm.
So in the boys' bathroom, they weren't doors on the stalls where the toilets were.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought this was not right. And I started a campaign called WSSIP. We shall sit in peace. Some people thought it was we shall shit in peace, but it's really we shall sit in peace.
Yeah, easy mistake. Speaking of compassion and empathy, I sometimes wonder, I've had therapists tell me that I'm too sensitive. In fact, when I was in third grade, we switched schools. I left Kuwait and I went to a school and they had to take some intake forms. She said, he's very, very sensitive. That's the only thing she wrote in the extra things. I look back now, I'm like, well, that explains a lot. I wish I would have seen that intake form. But some people feel compassion, but they feel, let's say, powerless. And then I wonder, with someone like you seem to have turned this into a movement. What's the difference to you between someone who cares and someone who actually changes things?
Well, I think a lot of people care, but they feel powerless.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people are satisfied complaining or keeping up with the news that, they're following the news and they feel like, well, that's something. At least they're aware. I don't know. I'm a put your money where your mouth is kind of guy. I think it is really difficult for everyday people to be effective in terms of
Mm-hmm.
trying to influence what our government does.
Is it that we're distracted? Is it that we're desensitized? Is it that it feels far away from us? I mean, it sometimes feels like we're all living behind these sort of walled off communities in the context of a world that, as you described at the beginning of this conversation, rewards profit and sort of punishes dissent violently and consistently, whether it's about Black Lives Matter or what happened in Flint or any of these things. How do you stay rooted in values without burning out or, as you say, becoming cynical or disillusioned?
Well, it's the joyful journey for justice. I was in New York City and saw this sign that said, "Action is the antidote to despair." And they attributed that to Joan Baez.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of agree with that. They also say, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. I feel better doing something about it than just kind of accepting it. I mean, there's this quote from Tutu that says, it's not possible to be, in the presence of oppression, it's not possible to be neutral. If an elephant is standing on the tail of a mouse, you can say you are neutral, but the mouse will not much appreciate your neutrality. You need to do whatever you can. And I think that, actually calling your member of Congress
Mm-hmm.
is an effective thing to do. Clicking doesn't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Emails doesn't do anything. But actually calling on the phone, it's an easy thing. You don't actually talk to the congressperson.
Yeah.
All that's happening is that the guy on the other end is writing down, hey, I got a call that said something about this. And the congressperson gets a report. So that's effective. I think writing letters to the editor in your local paper is effective. I think your congressperson looks at that stuff. And of course, using your feet, participating in demonstrations.
As you were speaking, I wondered, because Ben & Jerry's, of course, is famous for endorsing so many progressive causes in moments in history, LGBTQ+, the climate action. How do you feel about not only the legacy, but now that Unilever owns the company, do you see yourself as connected to the brand's voice? Is Unilever owning Ben and Jerry's changing in your mind something that you helped build? And in this moment of people discussing boycotts or wanting people to be aware of what to buy, what to spend their money on, what are your views on Ben and Jerry's?
Well, Ben and Jerry's was an independent, publicly held corporation. Unilever wanted to buy it. I was opposed to the sale.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it would be the death of the social mission of Ben and Jerry's. As it turned out, in general, the social mission prospered under the ownership of Ben and Jerry's. There's currently some disagreements that I don't want to go into. So I was concerned that was going to happen, and for many, many years, the social mission thrived.
So, after a life of activism and founding an iconic brand, I want to just hear from you how you think we should sustain hope. What would have to change specifically in Gaza and US policy for you to feel that your efforts were worth it, or are they regardless?
They are worth it regardless. You need to fight for justice. As Martin Luther King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it does bend toward justice. But it doesn't bend by itself. It only bends if we bend it that way. And, there's always been a battle of justice versus injustice. This is a long battle. We just have to try to shove it in the right direction.
And I'm so grateful to you for trying to do that and reminding us that we all have the power one way or another to do that. Thanks so much for taking the time to join me. I know you got to go, but I really appreciate it. And it's really been enlightening.
Ahmed, it's been good to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
That was Ben Cohen, co-founder of Ben & Jerry's, activist, and frankly, a moral compass in times when so many are afraid to speak up. This conversation reminded me that dissent isn't about shouting into a void. It's about refusing to be silent when your silence makes you complicit. And it's about love, radical, inconvenient love, for people you may never meet, but whose lives matter just as much as your own. If you appreciated this conversation, please share it, leave us a review, and remember, the world doesn't change when we whisper what we know. It changes when we dare to say it out loud. Thanks for listening.